Welcome back, everyone. As always, it is a blessing to be here. Today we are covering XRP at exactly $1, the line everyone is watching. Here's what we will be looking at. We have XRP sitting right on a round number that traders have been defending for weeks. We have Ripple voting in favor of a Ledger amendment. We have a Robinhood listing in the United Kingdom. We have an exploit that a lot of people are going to describe wrongly. And we have Stellar, Hedera, and XPR network all telling the same story underneath. Let us start where we always start, with the board. Total crypto market cap is sitting at $2.17 trillion. Fear and greed is at 36, which is fear. Bitcoin dominance is 58.5%. And the altcoin season index is at 31 out of 100. Put those two together and you have the picture for today. Money is not leaving crypto in a panic, it is hiding inside Bitcoin. That is what a dominance reading near 60% with an altcoin index in the low 30s actually means. Altcoins are not being sold off in a crash. They are being ignored. Now to the number that matters. XRP is trading at $1, down about 1.5% on the day. Not $1.02, not 98 cents. $1 right on the number. Here's my take on that, and I want to be careful with how I say it, because round numbers make people say silly things. A round number is not support. There is nothing magic about a dollar. What a round number actually is a place where a lot of separate people have quietly agreed to pay attention. Stop losses clustered there, limit orders clustered there. Headlines get written when it breaks. So the level matters, not because the chart says so, but because enough humans decided it does. That is a real force. And it is also a fragile one because agreement can dissolve in an afternoon. What I am watching is not whether XRP touches $1. It already has. I am watching whether it closes below it and whether volume shows up when it does. A drift below $1 on thin volume is noise. A break below $1 on heavy volume is a decision. Let us look at what is actually happening around the asset, because the news this week is more interesting than the candle. The first story, and this is the one I think is genuinely underrated, Ripple has voted in favor of the FixCleanup amendment on the XRP Ledger. Now, amendment votes are not exciting. Nobody makes a thumbnail out of a maintenance proposal. But this is the part of a network that tells you whether it is actually alive. A ledger where validators are proposing, debating, and voting on amendments is a ledger that is being maintained by people who intend to keep using it. Compare that to the very long list of chains where the last meaningful protocol change was years ago, and the founders have moved on. Governance activity is a heartbeat. It is not a price catalyst, and I am not going to pretend it is one. But if you are holding this asset for years rather than weeks, it is the kind of thing that should quietly reassure you. The second story, Ripple is pushing a unified platform bringing XRP, the XRP Ledger, and RLUSD together for banking clients. My read on this one is simple. The stablecoin is not competing with XRP. It is the on-ramp for the conversation. A bank does not begin a relationship by taking on exposure to a volatile asset. It begins with something that behaves like a dollar. Once the settlement rails are already in place for that, using them for something else is a much smaller decision than it was before. So I do not read RLUSD as a threat to XRP. I read it as the boring first step that has to happen before the interesting one can. Third, Robinhood has launched XRP Access in the United Kingdom, and price prediction coverage has flipped on the back of it. Here's my honest take. A new listing venue is real, and it does widen the funnel. But I would not build a price thesis on a listing. Listings expand who can buy. They do not create the reason to buy. Availability is necessary, and it is not sufficient. And the market usually prices in a listing faster than the retail flow actually arrives. Now, the fourth story, and this is where I want to slow down because I have already seen it being described carelessly. There are reports that a bridge called TX was drained of 99.7% of its reserve in an exploit worth around $200,000. Please listen to this part carefully. A bridge is not the ledger. A bridge is a separate piece of software usually built by a separate team that moves value between two networks. When a bridge is exploited, what failed is that bridge. The XRP Ledger itself is not what was drained here. I'm not saying that to defend anything. I am saying it because accuracy is the entire point of this channel, and because the same confusion happens every single time. Bridges have been the single most attacked part of this industry for years, precisely because they hold pooled funds and sit outside the security assumptions of the chains they connect. The honest lesson is not that XRP is unsafe. The honest lesson is that anything holding pooled reserves is a target. And that $200,000 is small in dollar terms, but total in percentage terms for the people who were in it. 99.7% of a reserve is not a partial loss. For those users, it is everything. Let us go across the rest of the basket because they are all saying the same thing today. Stellar is at just under 16 cents, down about 1.9%. Hedera is at 6.5 cents, down about 1.1%. XPR Network is at just under 1/4 cent, essentially flat on the day. And now XPR Network specifically because it deserves its own moment. Flat is interesting today. Everything else in this basket is red by 1 to 2%, and XPR is close to unchanged. I want to be careful not to oversell that because on a small cap asset, flat can simply mean nobody traded it. Thin books do not move. That is the boring explanation, and it is usually the right one. But it is worth noting and it is worth watching whether that holds if the broader market takes another leg down. An asset that does not fall with everything else on a red day is either being quietly accumulated or being completely ignored, and the way you tell the difference is volume over the following few sessions, not one day's candle. Quick macro, and I will keep it brief because the macro is not the story today. Bitcoin is at roughly $63,300, down about 1/3%, and Ethereum is at roughly $1,875, down about 1/10%. Both are barely moving. That is the tell. This is not a crash day. This is a nothing day, and altcoins are bleeding slowly underneath a market that is not paying attention to them. So let me pull all of that together. XRP is at $1. That level is not sacred. It is just crowded. The network underneath it is being actively maintained, and Ripple is building banking infrastructure around it, which is the slow kind of progress that never trends. A bridge got exploited, which is a real event that says nothing about the ledger, and the entire altcoin complex is being ignored while money hides in Bitcoin. If you are looking for a reason to panic today, I do not think the data gives you one. If you are looking for a reason to be certain, it does not give you that either. What it gives you is a market with no conviction in either direction, and in those markets, the people who do best are usually the ones who do the least. As always, none of this is financial advice. Nothing here is a price prediction. Everything I have shown you today is a live figure with a source, and you should go and check every one of them yourself. If this was useful, hit that like button, subscribe, and ring the notification bell so you catch these breakdowns as they come.